So this talk, and I will introduce our speaker in a moment, comes at a very good time. Shomrei has, and lots of the members are sitting on this screen, Shomrei has reinvigorated its Social Action Committee. It has taken on a number of projects, and there's a lot of talk about Tikkun Olam. And so to get somebody to come talk about how he actually changed his life and decided to make some significant transitions and take on Tikkun Olam, it's a perfect time, and I am so thrilled that you're here. So without much further ado, I'm going to introduce Dan Marcus. Dan, I asked Dan, and I'm sure he'll get to the story because we're going to talk about the story of his life. I asked Dan how long he was actually at Shomrei, and he and his family were at Shomrei for 15 years and lived in Montclair for 15 years. And I think there are a lot of your old friends here. So happy to welcome you back, Dan. So I will turn this over to you and let you get started and let you talk to us about Tikkun Olam and what you chose to do. So thanks, Dan.
All right, great. So first of all, I want to give credit to my wife, Kim, who I'm sitting in her grand studio with her fancy ring light. So thank you, Kim, for making this all possible.
You look good.
Thank you. Kim and I actually ended up coming to Montclair to some extent because of Shomrei. When we were looking for a community to move to from the Upper West Side, we were kind of terrified of actually leaving Manhattan, where we had spent a lot of time. And on every journey that we went, to every community we went, we made a point of going to the local synagogue. And Shomrei was very open and welcoming to us when we came. And we felt like that was a community that we would feel at home at. And it was really an important element of us deciding to go to Montclair. So I'm so happy that we were part of Shomrei, and I'm happy to give this talk today as somebody who still feels an affinity and knows probably everybody on this call. Even though we are now in the village, I still feel a certain hominess about talking at Shomrei. In terms of this talk, a lot of the slides that I'm going to look at and show are actually based on the first adventure I went on when Shirley first approached me. I think she followed me on Facebook, and there were a lot of pictures that I journaled as I was going through my adventures in Ghana. And she thought it would be interesting to people to see what had happened while I went on this adventure. But the trip to Ghana was the first of what I dedicating myself to Tikkun Olam. I'm going to actually just put this first slide on and then continue to talk to sort of frame things a little bit. Let me just make certain that this works. Okay, and then let me put this on. I think that works. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Right, okay. Oh, sorry. So I spent my career working in financial services. I'm an IT guy. I do software development. I started out writing code, but I ultimately, it wasn't all that long before people said, you really need to be in sort of like a situation between working with the people who are trying to figure out how to get the code to write and the people who are actually writing the code. So I worked for 30 years, and as you can see by all these logos that I put on this screen. I did work for a few small companies, which you wouldn't recognize. But these four, I'm sure you do recognize. And I spent 18 years between Barclays and Lehman Brothers. I generally would change my job every 2 to 3 years. And I was kind of the person that they would throw into some sort of business area or department or business problem where they didn't know what to do. So I would, sometimes I would be the only person working on the project in the beginning. Sometimes I would be taking over some department that was there, but they wasn't doing what they needed it to do. It was a really fun time. I don't regret one iota about my working in financial services. I had teams all over the world. I got to sit at executive tables and work with CFOs and CEOs and what have you. My family got to live in the UK for a couple years, and my kids got to go to school there. And at the end of it, I became this managing director and did this CDO thing, and they pay you pretty well in financial services. I can't complain about it. But I felt at a certain point that I was becoming like the furniture. I'd just been there for too long. I wasn't as excited as I once was about the problems we were working on. I always enjoyed learning about financial services, but I kind of knew a great deal about it, so I wasn't as excited, and I just didn't feel like I needed the sort of financial support of this place anymore. And I had always wanted to go out and see the broader world. I mean, financial services is a little rarefied bubble. But it's not like the grand world that we live in. And it's clearly not an altruistic enterprise. So I had always felt a need to kind of do more. And so at a certain point, I just told them I was done. I was just gonna, and they had an equation at Barclays, the number of years you've been there plus your age, and you can just say, I'm going to retire. So I did. And the first thing that I said I wanted to do, I had lived abroad twice. I lived in Israel when I was in college. I lived on kibbutz. And obviously, Kim and I and the kids, we lived in London. And I have found that living abroad for a chunk of time is materially more meaningful to me than going on a trip, even if it's a couple weeks. I just find living there allows me to kind of feel part of whatever I've joined. And so I wanted to do it again, and I wanted to do it in an area of the world I didn't know anything about. And Africa was a place I'd never been to. I'm obviously a member of an African-American family, right? And Africa is the same color as my family. And I felt that it would be really interesting to live in a place where I was the minority, not the majority. I wanted to make certain that I went to a project that didn't repeat what I read as like bad, like sort of tourism where you try to do good things. Like I wanted to go someplace where I was using my unique skills, where whatever I was doing would actually fit with what the local group, and where I was kind of integrated into the community. And I found an organization in Ghana that offered me that equation, that combination of things. And so I said, bingo, I'm going there, right? Plus, like I said, I really wanted to go to Africa, and it was in Africa. I would have gone to another country and to another project if it had had the right, combination of things, but this one just happened to offer it. So the next few slides is really going to show you what happened in Ghana. I was there for the equivalent of 6 months. And at the end, I'll come back to kind of where I've been going from here in terms of a myriad of other things I'm doing in the world of Tikkun Olam. And again, I have the benefit, as maybe some of the people on this call, of being able to spend 100% of my time on whatever I want to spend it on. And I don't need anything from these organizations. I just want to make as much difference as I can, whatever the heck it is. Wherever I can offer my unique skills, great. And if I can't, but I can make a difference, then I'm up for it. So let's go into Ghana. So first of all, I don't know how many people know Ghana, little country in Africa, west coast of Africa, Gold Coast, as you might have read or learned about when you were in high school or college. The map over here shows you Ghana in the middle of West Africa. This graph here, this map here shows you actually the country of Ghana. And I was living in the city of Accra, which is down along the coast, even though it doesn't really operate like Miami with a fancy coastline. And the northern part of Ghana is much drier and much hotter than it is down in the south. It's actually there's a variegated environment that's there. I basically spent 100% of my time right around Accra. I did not go tour the country or tour West Africa. I just lived there to experience that. And the map in the middle shows you my commute. This is a Google map. I lived up at the top in a volunteer house, and I worked at a library, which I'll show you a little bit more, down towards the middle of the city. It was right in the middle of the market. Every day, my chocho, which I'll show you, dropped me off, and I'd have to walk about 20 minutes to get to the library. And I walked through one of those super crowded markets you might have seen someplace in the world, right? Kind of think of a shuk or something like that in Israel. I was walking through the shuk 20 minutes every day to get through there. There are a bunch of stats here that you can see, right? How big it is, what the distribution is, blah, blah, blah. You can read that yourself. Sorry, trying to learn this. I put this map. I know there's a lot going on this graph. You don't need to learn it all. At the end of the day, what fascinated me about this graph was it showed what is the distribution of income and life expectancy for every country in the world. So you can see the US way up here, right? You can see Japan over here. Actually, Israel is right over here, way up at the top, right? India, which is down here, you kind of have a view of India, and where that red arrow is pointing at a small little dot, that is Ghana. So Ghana, right, is not over here with a bunch of the other African countries that are like dead poor and dying all the time, right? It's more like India. I've been to India several times as part of the work I did in financial services. I mean, it definitely has poverty, but it also is a developed place, right? And that's what Ghana feels like. Some people used to call, and I put it up there, when we talked to the African professors at NYU, they said, oh, you're going to Ghana. That's Africa light, as opposed to going to the Congo, which I assume is Africa dark, right? It's much harder. So it wasn't that hard. Sorry, I'm still bad at this. I went there to go work with this guy here who's in the yellow. His name is Hayford Siwa. He started the Volunteer Partnership of Africa. He started in 2009. He was a young guy. He set up a school. He set up a health group. He took care of all sorts of kids. He had a whole bunch of different things, right? And that he stuck with that. He still has aspects of that. I came into Ghana as part of the Volunteer Partnership of Africa, and I stayed at the volunteer house. But even though I was at the volunteer house, I was usually the only person at the volunteer house, because he had significantly wound down the volunteer house in 2018. Let's see if I get this right. In 2018, here he is again. He became the executive director of the National Library of Ghana, because the president of Ghana said, hey, you're doing a good job on this nonprofit. One of the things he had was a mobile library where he would take it all over. He had a bunch of these vans, and he would go all over the country and give kids books. And the president said, yeah, you're doing a good job at those mobile libraries. Why don't you get involved in the library. Why don't you become the executive director of the National Library? So when I talked to him over Zoom saying, hey, I want to come to Africa and do this kind of stuff, and I'm an IT guy, he said, you know, sometimes with this volunteer stuff, we actually do projects with the library because we're actually trying to upgrade the library. We're trying to like give it a circulation system. We're trying to like put together digital libraries. We're trying to like help our people actually acquire knowledge. I've got a little team that I've only hired this year. You should go there and help them and work on the projects and teach them. I was like, I am down. That is exactly what I want to do.
So Dan, before you keep going, there's a question already that says basically, how did you find him or this project? And another question, which you might just slip in at some point, what language is spoken there? I think you will get to that because I remember that from your posts. So, but I wanted to just throw those in for you.
Yeah. So when I knew I was leaving Barclays, I started researching all sorts of volunteer opportunity. I knew I wanted to go to Africa. And I told you, I knew the kind of criteria for what would be a good volunteer, using my skills, not doing something that was alien to the group that would just fall apart as soon as you left. And so I researched all sorts of different organizations, and this one was a small one. And, you know, Hayford is ambitious. So when he saw my email asking for more information, he's like, I want to get on a Zoom call with you. So I was like, you know, and that just led to where it led. In this slide, this building here, this is the Accra Central Library. They were doing a little event, so they had these fancy tents up. They aren't usually up there, but I worked in this building every day, right? This room here is actually our equivalent of the Library of Congress, right? And where all these kids are sitting here down on the right, that is actually the room where I sat. It is actually the US government in the 60s or 50s helped build this room for the National Library when they first set up the library. And actually, once a week, about 30 kids would come into the room to learn about computers. And we would be programming and they would be learning. It was like a kind of a weird experience, but whatever. You know, it was kind of cool to see the kids in action. And you can see this here. One of the projects we worked on was creating, I don't know if you guys use the Montclair Digital Library on Libby. I mean, I use it extensively. I love it. We were essentially building Libby for Ghana. In Ghana, they have all kinds of restrictions, you know, like, you know, they can't afford expensive software. They have to figure out how to get books for cheap. I mean, it's not like they're like, you know, they're all when you try to build things in Ghana, and now I'm finding the same thing in the US, when you try to build things for nonprofits in the US, you have to figure out how to do it on a shoestring. It can't have any maintenance, right? You know, there's a lot of constraints around getting it done. Things I didn't have to worry about when I worked on Wall Street.
Yeah.
And in terms of the language, in terms of the language, they speak English there. It was an English colony once upon a time. So this was an event that happened at the library. It was actually kind of like a churchy-like event, which I'll get to later. These guys down here, all three of these guys were people in the IT department. They were all software developers and IT people that I worked with. This guy was also an IT guy that I worked with. This is kind of the group of it. Again, what I would say is I was the only person who looked like me at the library, period, right? And actually, when I would walk to work, I was the only guy who looked like me for a week. I'd never seen anybody who looked like me, zero, right? Which I found, that was another one of those things I kind of look forward to. Like, I want to know what that feels like. And well, they delivered, that's for sure. If we go here, Kim came out for 1 week to spend time with me towards the end of my adventures. I didn't do any tourist things, but Kim had me do a bunch of tourist things. And one of them was to go to the slave castles, which actually people do, like they go back to their roots in Africa to kind of get a feel for it. And it's a history that is very meaningful to people in the US and other parts of the world. It's sort of meaningful in Ghana. It's kind of interesting that the Ghanaians don't, they show this as a tourist site, but if you talk to your average Ghanaian or you look at what's going on in Ghana, this is not their focus, right? But my gosh, I mean, this was a horrible thing, as you can watch on 10 million films about what happened. And this place here, Cape Coast, and this one here, the Elmira Castle, these were places where slaves were taken out of the sort of upper part of Ghana. They were shipped out mostly to the United States. They were sent through this door, the door of no return. There were some god-awful stories about the women slaves who would be brought into like an area like this. And then the governor standing up here in the balcony would pick his favorite one to come up and like be with, right? And even worse, they'd have like a church above this place, the kind of dungeon or whatever it was where they kept the slaves before they sent them off. They'd be praying above where the slaves were. It was just dreadful, right? But it was an important historical thing for us to see. And it's part of Ghana. There's no way around it. It is an element of what happened there. This slide shows the importance. One of the things, there was a person at my upstate Catskill community who makes films, and he makes films of religious movements in Africa. And one thing he did was he did a bunch on Ghana. And he explained to me how important Christianity is in Ghana. And wow, is it important, right? This picture down here is a street preacher. All the time when I was walking to work, there would be people singing, sometimes whole bands going. You would constantly hear Christian music played in the market and all over the place, right? There were gigantic, kind of like you might imagine in the South, where there were gigantic conventions or whatever, where 10,000 people or more would come to see a preacher. This guy here came. There were signs all over Accra. He was from Nigeria. I went with my colleagues because one of the things I concluded, even as a Jew, was that there was no way I was going to get to know Ghana if I didn't in some way engage in the Christian community. So I occasionally would go to church to kind of get a feel for what it was like. I went to this big thing with the Nigerian guys to see what are 10,000 people going to listen to. And they would go all night long. We would get there at 6, they would stay all night. Sometimes they would do this 3 days in a row. Unbelievable, right? And when I was in that room on the computers, all my colleagues were also very religious, and we would have lots of moral conversations about, sexual education and abortion and all sorts of other things, right? Because that's just something you talk about, right? This sign here I thought was kind of just goofy. This was an imam saying sports betting is evil. Now try to imagine that being a big sign in Manhattan. I mean, I don't know, maybe you could imagine that, but a little odd. Sorry, I zoomed it. And here, there is, like I said, 15 or 18% of the country is Muslim. One of the things that's lovely about Ghana is that people get along. Like regardless of their religion, they get along. And they're very proud of the fact that there's never been a civil war. There have been dictatorships when the military has taken over, but there's never been fighting between the people during the modern age. So there's a sense of peace and comfort that you feel. I put this one here about the where you see the the Israeli, or the Jewish star. You see this all over Ghana. You see Israeli flags, you see the Star of David everywhere, and it has nothing to do with Israel. It has everything to do with the fact that it is the Star of David, and that is a symbol for the Christians that are in Ghana. Really quite fascinating. This, right before I left, I made a point of reaching out to see what is there any Jewish community at all in Ghana? And I spoke to this guy here, Noach, who is the rabbi of the Chabad in Ghana. He immediately responded with a WhatsApp recording and welcomed me into his synagogue. And this was a place where I went every week. I went sometimes Friday and Saturday, sometimes just one day Saturday. They also had Sunday morning services like down here. That's why I could take a photo. There was a vibrant, very vibrant Jewish community in Ghana, in Accra, largely attended by Israelis who were working or living in Ghana, but also travelers and folks that were, for whatever reason, in Accra. And Noach and Chabad in general, they know how to enjoy themselves. Every Friday night, there was Friday night dinner. Every Saturday afternoon, there was Saturday afternoon kiddush, like a big spread, sit down lunch, right? They had so much fancy alcohol because lots of these people were traveling all the time. So every time they went through duty free, they got another fancy bottle of scotch or gin or whatever. And Noach loved to drink that stuff, right? And they had parties, big parties. Like this party was for Sukkah, I think, or something like that. They had a gigantic fancy dinner for Rosh Hashanah where they had the ambassador of Israel there and the ambassador of the United States. There were 25 machine gun guards outside of the building where we work, because God forbid anybody should get hurt while the ambassadors are there, right? So it was my respite. It was where I could, because I was spending all my time in all those places I showed you before. But once a week, I went and hung out with people, even though they didn't speak English. They mostly spoke Hebrew there because it was Israelis, right? Noah, because he was from Brooklyn, he used to speak. He had 5 kids. I used to play with his kids all the time. Anyhow, I was very, very happy to have Chabad there. And I was saying that I've begun to kind of get involved a little bit. I went to the first time to an Orthodox synagogue here on the Lower East Side. And I feel more comfortable there because I spent a lot of time in Chabad, I got used to that kind of way of being. This is what people see in various photos, but it's my own view of it. This, I think people were astounded by when I would send them over Facebook. These were all these images of street life in Ghana, in Accra, right? This picture down here, these are all goats that were being sold, live goats, right? I think this was around the time of Christmas or something like that. I think people buy live goats for Christmas. Whenever you are in traffic, because there's tons of traffic in Accra, anytime you come to a stoplight, there are tons of people coming with drinks on their head, food on their head, whatever. They're selling, soccer balls on their head. Everything is for sale on the streets. So that was happening. The markets, this is an example of the market. This is an example of the market. I'm telling you, it was so crowded, you'd have to kind of be very careful about going through. This one I put in for my kids' sake. I don't know if your kids have had to read Chinua Achebe's, right? Books, right? But this was actually a cart full of yams. I was like, of course, I need a picture of the cart full of yams. And, you got to watch out for yourself because it is Africa. They have holes in the concrete. You could fall in. If you just are reading your book and walking, you might disappear. And then the last thing I have here is just this little track. There's a lot of fires that are going on there. because they burn their trash sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time. It's not terrible, but you would never see that in the United States, or at least not many areas of the United States, but you see it a lot in Accra. Shirley, am I doing okay? You're on mute.
My daughter just called for a moment, but apologies for that. Let's do a few more minutes because I want to, oh, the questions are coming in. So
Okay.
I want to make time for that. You want one of the questions, or you want to do?
We'll just go a little bit. I think there are only a couple more slides.
Okay.
So a lot of people are always interested in what do they eat there, right? These are all the things I ate, right? You know, wachi, jollof, right? This is fufu, where they pound the cassava and they make it into a dish. This was my favorite dish, red bread. I used to go deep into the market to go get this. And in the morning, I used to eat this corn and kind of nut thing. It's kind of good. And these 4 pictures down here are really, as part of the nonprofit, as part of the volunteer partnerships, they had a farm. And the farm, near the farm, they grew cocoa. And so this is actually a cocoa bean that Kim and I, when we were there, we picked it and we tried it. It was kind of cool. And actually they make palm wine. So this is them cutting down the palms, and then, you know, it's kind of like deep South, you know, distillery right in the middle of the farm. It was kind of cool. This was actually the place where I lived, right? So this was me at a rainstorm. This was one of the Ghanaian people who worked there and lived all the time in the area. I did my own laundry by hand and I had to hang it. So I got used to doing that. That's a real adventure, I must say. Some people in the neighborhood didn't have running water, so they would go to the well and they would take it themselves. When I would go to work, I would always go in one of these. This is what we called a chocho, right? A chocho is kind of a vanny thing, and they ranged in size, but you would jam in there like 10, 12 people, and we would take that 50-minute ride. This was a local church that was with, I don't know, not very far from where I lived. And that place would fill up 3 days a week, and they would all be singing, and you would hear the music throughout the entire neighborhood, right? And there was another church not far away, and they'd be singing too. So all around me, right? Almost every day of the week, singing happening, right? And of course, you know, we had the cockfights. And we weren't really cockfights, but, you know, like chickens were living all over the place. They were like sparring, right? It's just how it went. Some people, everybody, whenever they were on my Facebook, they always wanted to know about this police thing I had. So when I would walk every day from my residence to the main highway where I would get that chocho. And that was actually being developed by the Chinese. You could feel China's soft power in Ghana because they were spending a lot of money redeveloping the highway for Ghana. And what was interesting was all the trucks would say Sino truck. So like everything that was worth anything was come in from the Chinese. And most of the people who did the work were Ghanaians, but all of the managers and all of the engineers were Chinese, right? So whenever I'd walk by, I'd see these guys. And I had an odd experience with some guy who used to run along the road in the morning very early. And he started yelling at me, you know, and, you know, it was sort of broken English, but he was not happy with me as a white guy, which I very rarely, if ever, experienced except in this regard. But for whatever reason, he took it out on me, and his attitude towards me over the course of a couple of weeks became more and more threatening, to the point where he picked up rocks and he threatened to throw them at me, big rocks, and I was getting very nervous. So I started talking to my volunteer organization, and we actually had to do something about this fellow, right? And that was the weirdest thing, to actually engage in a justice, you know, group inside of another country, where we had to get the police involved. They had to pick him up. They had to take him down. There was a lot of money being passed in order to make all this happen. And then I actually had to go to a court to sit with this guy and my friend from the volunteer house. It was just an very odd experience. At the end of the day, you know, after a bit of this, he left me alone. But it definitely made for a story. What can I say? I actually, because I'm Dan Marcus and I like to explore things. I mean, I made a point of trying to find all kinds of culture. There was an Alliance Française and a German institute that offered all sorts of programming that I would read about and I would go to. So this one here was actually a literary festival, all African writers, mostly from Nigeria and Ghana, and they would read from their books and we would talk to the authors, right? I'd go to dance performances. This thing, Hitmaker, is kind of the equivalent of American Idol. We went to the National Theater to go watch the filming of their equivalent of American Idol. They had film fests. And what was also interesting when they would have the the literary fest or the film fest, was they would ask the people who were at it to sort of ask questions so you could listen to the banter between people who were talking to the authors or the filmmakers and the filmmakers themselves. And, you know, again, I was unique amongst that group. This thing I put in, like in Ghana, when somebody dies, they have a giant funeral, right? They spend like when we think about the money we spend on a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, that's the money they spend on a funeral, right? You have to save up for yourself to die, right? They celebrate it for a whole week. It's a big deal, right? The other thing that I did when I was there was I made a point of like reaching out to people I knew in America who knew people in Ghana. And then I connected up with those people and I would meet them. And this is an example of a fellow that I met when I was there. He's actually a dentist, and a dentist is kind of like a doctor in Ghana. He told me all kinds of crazy things about what happens in dentistry in Ghana. Like if you don't solve kind of a toothache and you just let it go, which sometimes happens in Ghana, your whole face will swell up and then you'll die, right? And he would tell me these stories. I was just like, oh my gosh, right? But in any event, culturally, every week or two, I was going to something to see, you know, what it was like. And actually, when Kim came, we went to where Du Bois, sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. Du Bois actually, essentially, at the end of his life, came to Ghana, right? And we went to the place that the Ghanaians made available to Du Bois. So it's another like cultural stop that if you were going to Ghana, you would kind of have to go there, right? And then this last slide, which is sort of the bookend to the one at the top, these are all the organizations that I'm currently engaged in some way or another, right? I'm at different levels of engagement with them. And I kind of tell people that I'm planting seeds, right? Like I'm constantly looking at different organizations where I might be able to make a difference or add value. And it takes a little while. You know, I mean, having worked in financial services, I was used to working 60 or 70-hour weeks. I was used to being in the middle of everything. This shift has taken some time and adjustment, right? And I've been kind of figuring out how to get all those things. But maybe before we focus on this slide, which I could tell you about these different organizations, and you know, I welcome anybody who says, hey, I have this great organization in New York. They're always looking for good people to do X. You're an IT person. You should contact them. Send me an email. I'd love to talk to them. But I think that the Ghana adventure was a good way to start, right? It kind of met a dream of mine. Again, being in New York now and with COVID, it's a little harder to establish it. I do get to live with my family, which is good. It's very hard to kind of be abroad for 6 months by myself. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
So Dan, I have a couple of questions. And why don't we take down the slides for the moment? And
okay,
so we can see the full screen. You can see people looking at you. One question came from June, who said, how readily were women accepted in the Chabad synagogue, or in this, the Chabad services? Would a woman feel comfortable showing up at Chabad?
So there were a number of women who did come, but not that many. I actually, one of the things I loved about Noach is I could ask him challenging questions. And I actually asked him that. I said to Noach, where in the Torah does it say that we need to have this complete separation? Where does it say that? And he basically couldn't point to one. He said sort of like convention, right? And I talked to him about his relationship with his wife. And they have just kind of agreed that they each have their own roles. They're different, and they don't necessarily want to be in each other's spaces, and that's the way they're comfortable. They've made a kind of a conscious decision to do it, which is in alignment with the group that they've kind of part of. But I have a very good friend, Judith, and I would send her emails about how if she came to Ghana, would she feel comfortable coming to Chabad? And I actually think, knowing Judith, because she's so engaged in synagogue activity and in sort of the practice of the religion, that she would not feel comfortable there.
So that's a whole other conversation, which you can have about about religion and women, but we'll hold that one for another study. But I guess what you're saying is it's not so different in Ghana than it is elsewhere relative to women in more Orthodox settings.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
with
I mean,
that,
yeah.
There are two things that I wanted to pull together here. So you were in Ghana for 6 months, right? Or just about. And at the end of the day, how did the library project work out? People want to know, what does that project look like?
So they do have a digital library now that is
Oh.
available for people in the country. It was helpful that it kind of was completed during the midst of COVID. You can only download the application when you're in Ghana, which is unfortunate in terms of, just sort of being able to see what they're doing. Another project that I worked on was they have a national library, and I never knew anything about libraries before I went there, but if
Eileen
you
wants to talk to you about that, but go on.
all right, so when you have a national, when you publish a book in a country, you have to give it an ISIN number, or if it's music, you have to give it a different kind of thing, but you have to give these things a number, and that's part of like the cataloging and what have you. So they've always had that process. And in Ghana, because they didn't have any technology, if you were living in the northern part of the country and you were publishing a book up there, you had to drive 8 or 10 hours to pay your money to be able to get your catalog number and to get it approved. We put up together an application for people to actually upload their digital and to pay for the whole thing online. So we stopped all that. And that is now live, right?
Wow.
There was a cataloging system, which they were partway through. I didn't work that much on it. They were using one of the things that happens a lot in these countries and probably in nonprofits is they use open source software. So you can buy open source book cataloging systems and checkout systems, and they were implementing an open source system.
So Dan, take us back to New Jersey. There's questions now. You've been working with kids in Newark. You've gone from Ghana to Newark, and now you have a technology club for kids. Is that right?
Yeah. So actually, I think it was maybe when I was home for a little bit, and I worked with a group in New York while I was at Barclays called Yes Scholars. Yes Scholars is a group that focuses on identifying high-performing middle school kids. And if you apply and get accepted to Yes Scholars, They then give you enrichment programs and mentoring programs, and they guide these kids all the way through into the end of college, right?
Wow.
And they are highly successful at getting these kids to greatly excel by really stepping in and doing a lot for them. So I wanted to find something like that, but I'm in the tech world, and being in, even with Ghana, I said, I've never understood why more people don't learn how to program and don't learn all this technology stuff. I just don't understand it, right? And so I was like, I want to figure out how to go to some low income school and find high performing kids and teach them technology. So I actually reached out to Dale, who asked the question, and because we all know Dale knows Newark better than anybody, and Dale worked with me to kind of identify a few different schools. We ultimately ended up talking to the KIPP school that had started a new high school called the Lab School there. I actually had a meeting with my club today at 3:15. What I learned, though, I had thought that what we would do was build some sort of software project that we could sell or make money on, right? Because I did that when I was like in college, and I was like, yeah, it's really exciting when you can build something and make money. It makes you really happy. But when I talked to my high school friends from Twilight, my upstate community, they told me that that idea maybe sounds cool for you, but that's not going to work with lots of kids. You need to come up with something that has defined periods when they have to accomplish something, and it has to be competitive. So what we ended up doing was setting up a chapter with a national organization called the Technology Students Association. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. It's a wonderful organization, and they have 39 different contests that they run every year. And they have maybe 10 of them that are computer oriented, software, cyber, all kinds of different things. But they also do things like today, we were focused on forensic science. Here in New Jersey, they run a forensic science contest where they get the state head of the forensics group for the actual police to create a crime scene. And then the kids go in and have to figure out what happened, right? And they have a whole contest, right? But they have it for that. They have CAD, they have GIS mapping, they have all kinds of stuff. So we now have these kids, and we're going to try to grow this over a group. I also feel it's one of these things where you need to invest, not just like a semester. You need to invest over a series of years with kids and get more kids and learn from it. And plus, what the heck do I know about education? I'm like, a computer dude. But that's the avenue that we're going down.
Very cool. Very cool. I have one more question in the chat, and then we can collect some more. So this, of course, comes from the architect in the room. David Kanagas was talking about, he saw some downtown high-rise buildings, 10 stories, and he was wondering if there is a area of high-rise buildings more, what's the word I'm looking for? Denser than what you might see.
I guess if the question is, do they have like a highly dense and high area of Accra, which was the city I was living in, I would say not really. I mean, like I think probably their highest building is maybe 20 stories high. And they tend to be spread out on larger, kind of like maybe LA has spread them out, right? It's than New York or Hong Kong or Singapore or something like that. So where they get density is in these markets where, I mean, the density of people is super high. The height of the buildings, not so much.
Interesting. So Stuart had a question about developing. Stuart, I think maybe you should just unmute and say your question, because it's.
Yeah, it probably wasn't.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan.
Uh,
So my sense is that in many parts of the world, in the developing world, people who never had access to landline telephones now have access to mobile wireless technology, which is a great thing. So they kind of leapfrogged over the older technology that we all grew up with. I guess my question is whether part of the purpose of your library project or your hope is that something similar might happen. You might have a town that never had a physical library that, if it has Wi-Fi, I guess, would have access to the National Library. Is that, I mean, is it something that anybody anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world could have access to? Is that?
Yeah, definitely. The intention was to make available book collections to anybody anywhere in the country. I think another thing that they were trying to do, which I didn't get to while I was there, but there are a lot of local authors in Ghana who publish things that are only in physical form. And one of the things the library wanted to do, as they were able to get better distribution of their digital library, was to work with the publishers in Ghana to make some portion of their collection available to Ghanaians, because Ghanaians would like to read Ghanaian books, especially Ghanaian books that are not in English, right? So much of the digital stuff that's out there is stuff from the UK or America or whatever, but they wanted to see if they could actually start creating a funnel of content from the country and potentially even link it to a way for people to buy it like you would buy an Amazon book.
So when you say not in English, I guess what you were saying before is the national language is English. Are there many other languages spoken?
Yeah, there are I don't know, half a dozen or so languages that are spoken in Ghana. A lot of people speak a language called Twi. Most of the time when I'm even at work or in the market, when they're speaking amongst themselves, they're speaking in Twi mostly, right? As opposed to English. That's not to say they can't speak English. Some people in Ghana, I don't know, there's probably 25% or 20% of people in Ghana who don't speak any English. But it's not like, I don't know, I think I went to Thailand and there were a lot of people there who didn't speak English.
So we have time, I think maybe one more, and then I will tell you what's coming in at Nourish. All right. Nick, did you want to say something?
Yeah, in 2011, a group of us from Shomrei went to Israel, and one evening we sat around and talked, and Dan shared a yearning to do something more meaningful. And it's just such a pleasure to hear that you did it, that you're doing it, and that it's satisfying and gratifying, and that it wasn't just a pipe dream, that it's something you really wanted to do and that you're doing it. So thank you for sharing this incredible story. It really, I look forward to hearing more.
Right.
That's lovely, Nick. Thank you. It is wonderful to be able to share your journey, and like Nick said, fulfilling some dreams. It's great to be part of that. So I want to say thank you, a really big thank you. But before I tell everybody to applaud, I just need to tell you all what's coming down the road the next 3 months. Just as a reminder, Saturday the 14th is Hanukkah. Whoa. All right. Before I go on, June threw in. Where are you, June? Oh, there you are. You're not even on camera. June wants to know.
I'm with Bela now. On his.
You're on Bayless. June, do you want to say what you want to say, and then I will tell you what's coming down the road?
I recently read a book, I guess it was called Atomic Habits, and it was about if you want to change yourself or change kind of how you spend your time, that rather than look sometimes at a particular goal, you look at changing who you are. And I'm wondering if you feel you've changed your identity, that you now have kind of a new identity, that you've been doing more for others.
Yeah, that's a
That's
big,
really,
it's a
that's a
big
small,
question. I read that book also.
I did too.
And what I took away from it was sort of set your habits based on who you want to be,
Right.
right? And also something that they said, which was sometimes change happens like an ice cube melting. The temperature slowly goes up, nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens, and then all of a sudden it melts because it goes past that temperature. And I have found that I have to be patient as I transition into this other world. I have so much to learn. I I don't know how to operate exactly the way, but I have a kind of like a guiding star of what I'm trying to achieve. It's a general guiding star, and I'm still confident that it's leading me in the right direction, and I don't have any regrets about it.
I think that's lovely. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. And if we really want to know what changes happen, we'll bring Kim into the conversation for the next time. But yes, I think this.
No, I'm good. I'll keep him. He's good.
You'll keep him? That's great.
Yeah, he's good.
No, you can see change in ways that the person experiencing it might not even recognize, but you can see it, and the patience and whatever else. So thank you. Thank you both. Just a reminder, a couple of reminders. Sunday is Hanukkah, and we are having Shomrei's Hanukkah event. We're handing out Hanukkah bags. You can bring toys to which we will distribute, and we will light candles together. So we can come together as a community on Hanukkah. If you haven't yet signed up for a Shomrei bag and you're going to be in town, just let us know and we will make sure there's a Hanukkah bag for you. Now, at Nourish, three upcoming programs in January. January 19th, we are having Andrew Wallach, who is one of the senior COVID people for New York's Health and Hospital Corp. And he is part of the distribution of or the plans for distributing the vaccine. It should be a very timely and interesting conversation. So please, please join us on the 19th. Dan, by the way, you're invited to all of these. On February 9th, the Social Action Committee and the Food Insecurity Group specifically are going to bring us Hungry to Learn, keeping in line with our conversations about Tikkun Olam and what is going on in our community at large. And then on March 19th, we have an author, Gabrielle Glazer, who will be talking to us about her book, which is coming out in January. And it's about adoption processes and should be very, very interesting. More to come on all of these. With that, I wish you all a happy upcoming Hanukkah, Friday night, and everybody stay healthy, stay safe. It's so good to see so many faces, and we'll see you somewhere between December, January, and so on. So thanks, everybody. Dan,
Thank you.
Bye.
Dan, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Shomrei. Thanks, Dan.
Hey,
Bye.
thank you, Dan.
Shirley.
Bye.
And Dan, especially.